It's been 90 days since we created a terrarium with isopods where they survive by eating only what grows inside. In the last episode, we realized that the moss, which is the main food source for the isopods, is infested with mold. And we need to save the terrarium by replacing the affected areas. But with a terrarium full of isopods, it turned out to be not so easy to do. After all, we could accidentally throw some of them out, so we decided to use a stick to move the bugs to other areas, and only then we started to take the earth layers out. But as it turned out, isopods love to sleep under the roots and bushes, so we had to pull them out of there one by one. We needed to remove the affected moss as well as the forest clover, which was growing too fast and could not be food for the isopods because of the acid it contains. We made this elevation out of old wood, then we put the new moss and added decorations. And our terrarium got a whole new look. Now it has even more moss. Plus this wooden rock, which seems to be edible for isopods. When hunger comes, they start to eat everything. A saleswoman in the pet store whom I told about the terrarium advised me to buy these dwarf white isopods, which despite their small size are quite big eaters. I don't know if they can survive in such wild conditions without food. Maybe they are too spoiled for that. And what if they attack the black isopods? But when they met, they just touched each other's tendrils as if they were chatting about something and went on about their business. However, after about half an hour, they clearly divided into two groups. The white isopod settled on the wall of a wooden rock, and the black ones in the wet oak leaves, which they immediately ate. And by evening, the white isopods had clearly shown their appetite. They climbed on a decorative leaf together and began to eat it. Hey, that's a decoration, not food. At that moment, I realized that there was no point in hoping our terrarium will always remain beautiful as we know it. The animal world has its own rules and concepts of beauty. Therefore, they will eat anything they like without thinking how it will look afterwards. I wonder if bugs can think at all, or do they just understand that they need to eat, poop and reproduce? And then I saw a tiny dot on the glass, which under magnification turned out to be a very beautiful spider, which was not a usual spider, but a hopping spider. He jumped from glass to a spring of moss, and I never saw him again. In the meantime, the white isopods moved over to their rock and finding a small and tender moss on top, they began to eat it. It's a very pretty picture. They look like cows in a pasture. At this time, they were joined by black isopods that tried to dominate them, but they did not care at all and continued to greedily devour the moss until someone else did it. At the edge of the cliff, there is a small elevation, and I don't know why, but there is always someone sitting or fighting for that place. Perhaps this is the leader's throne, and a struggle for a place in a terrarium's hierarchy. Maybe the bugs are not as stupid as we thought. Behind the rock near the glass, we see other isopods sitting there and sticking on the glass their after-lunch poop, which meets condensation drops and gets washed into the soil. There, this mixture becomes a food source for the little worm. By the way, do you want to see what a newborn worm looks like? Here it is, such a little white hair, barely visible to the naked eye. At this age, worms are still colorless and very transparent, so we can see their organs in detail. While the human body has thousands of veins and capillaries, the worm's body seems to be only one big simultaneous vein, and we can see the blood pulsating in it. But at one point, I noticed that someone had cut off the stem of a wild strawberry plant and it has fallen. It didn't take me a long time to figure out who's done it. I think it was done by this isopod. Probably this is the way they make food for themselves. Tear off the leaves and wait until they begin to rot, and then they consume them. After all, rotten food is much easier for them to chew on than fresh food, as well as it is tastier to them. Under the new conditions, the ivy plant began to grow rapidly in size and produce new leaves. Remember what it was like at the beginning. The wild strawberry was also striving upwards, despite the fact it was regularly eaten by someone. As it turned out, isopods are nocturnal animals, which are active in total darkness, so I set the light bulb to only 1% light, too low for my eyes to see anything, but setting the camera to maximum sensitivity allowed me to see everything, so I left it at night to film what was happening. And here we see how actively they move around in the darkness, because then they can't be spotted by birds of prey, so they feel perfectly safe. On zooming the area near the tree bark, I noticed some kind of a creature. After numerous rewatchings of this moment, I still don't know what it was. But I did see at least hours of life of our decorative leaf. Isopods, as ruthless killers, gnawed at the body of the leaf, leaving just a thin skeleton. Also, we finally answered the question who was leaving traces on the terrarium walls and ceiling. It turned out to be this snail. It is so small I barely noticed it with my naked eye. It has 2 mm in diameter, and if you look closely, you can see its hard breathing. And then, one night, I noticed this. Oh my god, it's a mushroom! It seems to be a real mushroom growing in our terrarium. You probably don't believe me and think I put it there, but look, it really grows larger. It's impossible to fake that. Its base gets overgrown with some kind of needles, which perhaps protect it from predators. At the same time, the tree rocks has gotten this strange white mutant. Fortunately, the isopods ate it up. A few hours later, we noticed that there was some more growing mushrooms. It seems that we might have brought mushroom spores into the terrarium with the wood you see in the background. The abundance of moisture allowed them to develop and produce such beautiful mushrooms. Do you think we could eat them? I think it's better not to try. The mushrooms were growing pretty fast and stopped growing in just 2 days. Then I guess they released new spores from their caps and began to sag after completing their mission. Speeding up the filming, we can see isopods running up and eating mushroom feet, which seems to be rotting already. You know, I think that at one point plants in the terrarium will be almost gone, because isopods will eat all of them. Then, due to the lack of food, the population of isopods will decrease and the plants will revive. This way the ecosystem can balance itself, given that all the moss on the tree rock has already been completely eaten. This process has already begun. So be sure to subscribe to find out what happens to the terrarium in the future.